Africans are paying all-time record prices for fuel, and the end is not yet in sight. Economists believe that we could see 20 rand per litre before the end of the year. The organization Undoing Tax Abuse, OUTA, says the high prices can't just be blamed on the oil price. Over the past 10 years, the basic fuel price has gone up by 81%, but the levies we pay have increased by 126%. What is it that we're paying for? Wayne Duvenage, OUTA CEO, joins me now. Wayne, let's start off with just a basic explanation of what makes up that fuel price that we pay.
Yes, well, there's actually about 11 or 12 components, but the major one is the petrol levy. That's the fuel levy that goes straight into Treasury's coffers, and it is divvied out. It's not a ring-fence levy, by the way, but it was introduced a number of decades ago to contribute towards road construction, and it's also part of the allocations to provinces and that for roads. But they're earning far more than what they need, by the way. Then you've got the Road Accident Fund that deals with payouts to people who've been involved in accidents. These are claims due to disabilities that arise. And then there's other levies, which I said there's a number of them. That's the wholesale levy, the retail levy are the two big ones in the other levies. And then there's the carbon tax, the pipeline levy, a lot of smaller ones that make up that, which is now over 4 rand a litre. And if you add those 11 components together, or the three main sections, you get over 10 rand a litre. And then the rest is determined by what we call the BFP, the basic fuel price, which is what we pay for to bring Brent crude oil. The Brent crude oil price affects that, as well as the exchange rate, because that's all dollar-based. So if we've got a weak rand and high oil prices, which is happening at the moment, that goes up and spikes up quite a lot. But just last year, that was well down, below 5 rand, around about the 5 rand per litre mark. And this is where our problem also sits. But these incessant increases in these levies over the last decade has led to the problem that we have now. And we cannot ignore that, and government needs to pull back on these increases on the levies because we're overtaxed in that space.
Yeah, I read the paper that you put out, Wayne, and the levies in the last 10 years have increased by 128%. So now they make up more than half of what we're paying for fuel. Is there transparency, Wayne, on exactly how the levies are allocated and managed?
Yes, well, I mean, the fuel levy, there's no transparency. That goes into Treasury. It's like PAYE, it's like VAT, and Treasury, frustratingly to society, doesn't ring fence. Even the plastic bag tax, which is supposed to be ring fence for recycling initiatives and green matters, environmental matters, it just doesn't happen. They don't ring fence, which is wrong. Even the sugar tax doesn't go to dealing with things like diabetes and so forth. So it's not transparent. All the other levies go towards the costs that are allocated or associated with wholesaling, with retailing, and I think we need to start questioning why these levies continue to go up. They are generally inflationary related. And the one big issue that has gone up 173% over 10 years is this Road Accident Fund. And the Road Accident Fund used to wash its face. It was a well-managed fund. It was able to manage the allocations that it needed to pay out to road accident victims. It's necessary. That's the way we do it, as opposed to having what you call a third-party disc, which people weren't paying for. So it's not a bad way to allocate those funds. But the corruption and the maladministration that's taken place in that levy, in that fund, it has increased from 80 cents per litre to now over 2 rand per litre. And there's a lot of problems in that space. And this is what happens, is government tends to just throw money at the problem instead of addressing the maladministration and the corruption in the Road Accident Fund. And that's a big problem for society. And if they carry on like this, we've got a serious problem.
Is there a way of stopping this increase, Wayne, in the levies? It's revenue for government, right? Is there other avenues that they could be using instead of adding on more and more levies to this fuel price?
Well, yes, I think it comes down to a government that needs to stop this incessant overtaxation of soft targets. Motorists are soft targets is one area. And society as well, when it comes to having to increase VAT, which I had to do not so long ago. And I guess it comes down to what is government's policy and how does it manage itself without wasting taxpayers' money? Because if you don't waste, if you have sufficient funds to flow where they should flow to, then you don't need to rely on these other taxes. And that really is the crux of the matter. If there was not so much corruption, money was finding its way to where it should be going into, if there wasn't so much maladministration and having to bail out state-owned entities and so forth, the government could have a view next year in February when the Minister of Finance stands up and says, right, this year we're not going to increase fuel taxes. We're not going to increase the Road Accident Fund levy. We're going to put pressure on the Road Accident Fund to manage itself and its affairs properly and remove the corruption and the abuse that's taking place. We're going to tell the retail industry and the wholesalers to control their costs. We're not just going to dish out these inflation-related increases every year, because all of this mounts up to a problem which society has now, and these costs carry through to transportation, to the taxi industry, to so many people are negatively affected by these high petrol prices. So I think society, we can't force government to run their affairs. We can't tell them not to increase these taxes. We can put pressure on them, and I think it's through these types of communications and presenting into Parliament and making a sincere effort to get the Minister of Finance to sit up and realize no more should we tolerate and no more should they rely on increases from these levies.
You've also spoken about how this reliance on soft targets like motorists and these fuel levies is going to be problematic later as we switch from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles.
Yes. And there you see now, I don't think they've understood and realized that. And that's the problem with governments, is they have a 5-term view on their time in office. They set laws that impact on us decades down the line and not realizing what's coming. So in the next 10 years, if the world examples are on, we are generally in pace with the rest of the world. We're a bit behind on the electric vehicle policies that this country has to still unravel and put out there. And sadly, Kenya is well ahead of us. They've already got their EV policy. So as this country, as we start moving towards electric vehicles, and we have to, because they're not going to be making, some manufacturers in the next 2 to 3 years will not be making petrol, fossil fuel driven vehicles anymore. So we've got no option but to convert to electric vehicles. And you can imagine in 10 years' time when, let's say, 2/3 of the vehicles sold then are electric vehicles on the roads, and 50% of the vehicles are electric vehicles. These levies are not going to be achievable because they come through fuel. Now, one might say, yeah, but then they'll just put it onto the electricity price. Well, they won't be able to, because the electricity price is way out of sync with the reality, and people will be charging these vehicles through green energy sources, which are free energy sources on the roofs of their houses and office parks and so forth. So we can see that the income, which is about, I would say, 140 billion rand a year just through the Road Accident Fund and the fuel levy, currently, or 130 billion rand, is going to come under extreme pressure and start going backwards. Now, how do they mitigate that? How do they, where do they go to collect those lost taxes? And so government has to become a lot more smarter when it looks towards the future of its tax revenues. And I'm afraid the past government, right up until now, have not done so. So they would be wise to stop relying on these levies. They would be wise to not increase them, because that way they force government to start becoming more circumspect about where they're going to get their revenues in the future and how to manage their current revenue streams.
Wayne, thank you so much. We appreciate it for giving us that deep dive into the fuel price and what exactly we're paying for. Wayne Duvenage of the organization Undoing Tax Abuse. EncA and I have been walking to work this whole week. We have to go back to Cape Town and fill our tanks. We're not looking forward to that, I tell you.
It's true, actually. It's been quite nice walking around.
Absolutely. Now.